Hey guys, Modelling Weekly here. Today I'll be doing a full beginner's tutorial on how to use and apply oil paints on your models, along with a few brilliant weathering techniques that will make your builds look completely professional. Oil paints are a brilliant way of adding interest to your kits, so without further ado let's hop into the video. First and foremost, let's talk about the oil paints themselves. They are in fact oil based, and most of the time they utilise linseed oil. They thin down very nicely with white spirit, which is an odourless spirit with a pretty awful smell. And there is a massive difference between a cheap oil paint and a more premium product. You'll find that a cheaper alternative will be a lot more grainy, inconsistent, and just generally harder to blend and work with. You can, however, still work with them on models, and they are a good way of getting into using oil paints for a cheaper price. As you progress though, you'll find the need to upgrade to some better quality stuff, and it will be well worth it. I recommend Winsor & Newton. They are a good balance between quality and price, and very often you will find them on sale in places such as Amazon. So once you have got your hands on some oils, the next thing you need to take into consideration is the surface that you're applying them onto. The oil paint itself is fairly harmless, though the white spirit that you'll be using a lot can absolutely destroy certain types of paint. If you are using acrylic or enamel based paints, you must lay down a layer of varnish before doing any work, as this will provide a nice layer of protection between the base coat and any white spirit that you may use. The type of varnish you use doesn't really matter, you simply have to give it enough time to cure before applying anything on top. Ideally, the varnish should be matte, as this acts as a sort of sponge for the oil paints and white spirit to blend nicely into. My favourite is XF86 from Tamiya, though if you don't have an airbrush, I'd use a spray can, as brush painting varnish can lead to some dodgy results. Now, if your base paint layer is lacquer based or hybrid such as Tamiya, you don't necessarily need to apply a varnish layer, though I would just to be on the safe side. Once you have established a nice varnish layer for your oils to sit on, it's time to prepare for painting. Here's what you'll need. It's important that you have at least 2 clean brushes to hand, as you'll be using one to apply the oil paint and the other to clean any excess with white spirit. I'd also recommend getting a nice soft blending brush, as this improves the effect of a lot of techniques by a huge margin. Next, get yourself a few pieces of paper towel, as you'll need this for cleaning your brushes with white spirit. And then you will of course need to get a hold of some white spirit, which is generally super cheap and available on Amazon Prime if you don't already have some. Mine has yellowed up a bit for some reason, though it still works the same. Now, the next thing is super important. You need some form of cardboard on which you can squeeze out your oil paint. By leaving the paint on the cardboard for at least 10 minutes, it will draw out a lot of the oil in the paint, making it super nice to work with and provides a better result. It also decreases the drying time. It's also worth noting that you should be in a very well ventilated workspace before you begin weathering. White spirit smells awful and can be somewhat harmful for your health if you breathe too much of it in repeatedly. It's not the worst stuff to be exposed to, as breathing in paint is worse, though it's not exactly healthy. When you squeeze your paint out onto the cardboard, bear in mind that a little goes a long way. It's not cheap stuff and it's very easy to squeeze out more than you need. Also, make sure to wipe the tube after using it, as this will prevent a nasty build-up of paint. Right, with all the basics laid down, let's get into some nice weathering techniques. I've got 4 great effects to explain, so let's get started. First up, we have the good old reliable oil wash. You'll need a clean container, preferably disposable, as the white spirit will leave an annoying smell behind even after you clean it out. Now mix the colour you want in the container. It's very simple, just squeeze out specific tones and mix to your taste. Next, add the white spirit, using a pipette to make the mixture 2 parts thinner and 1 part paint. Mix thoroughly with a brush. There will be some residue left after stirring, so you can pour the top liquid into another container if you wish. Then, pick up some of the wash in the brush. You may get too much at once, so you can easily reduce the amount it is holding by touching the edge of the container gently. Next, begin touching it carefully onto the panel lines of the model. Capillary action will pull the wash along the lines, so no need to drag the brush, just dab it on the panel lines. Leave this to dry for about 5 to 10 minutes for the white spirit to evaporate. Then, using your clean brush dampened in clean white spirit, remove the spots of oil paint that are sitting on the surface, though not in the panel lines. A white spirit dampened paper towel can be good for this too, especially for larger areas. And I don't recommend using a cotton bud though, as they tend to pull the wash out of the panel lines, which we don't want at all. And there you go, now you know all about oil washes and how to apply them. On to the next technique. Another great technique to know about is how to create realistic streaks and stains, whether it be on the side of a tank turret or coming out of aircraft exhausts. You won't need a separate container for this one, simply the oil paint laid in cardboard is enough. Using a brush, pick up a speck of the colour you want and apply it on the model at the point where you want the streak to begin. So for exhaust stains, apply the dot right next to the exhaust vents. Remember, don't do too much at once, we want to build up the effect gradually. Also, if you do apply too much, don't worry, as you can easily remove it with spirits. Next, bring out another brush, preferably a soft blending brush, though any will be fine. Do make sure it is dry though, as any white spirit residue can ruin how the oil paint blends. Now pull the oil dot in a streaking motion in the direction you want the streak to form. On an aircraft, this should be in the direction of airflow. You can continue dragging it as much as you want until it is blended enough for your taste. You can then go back and apply more if you wish, or maybe even layer it with different colours to build up an effect. As you get better with this effect, the more realistic and dynamic your results will be. I'm by no means an expert, though there's a definite improvement in my work compared to when I started with oils. So that was a quick and easy effect, let's move on to the next. Now for forced highlights and shadows. This is probably the hardest technique to pull off, as your blending skills do need to be pretty good to make the oil paint fit in with the surface nicely. The technique is mostly aimed towards AFV modelers, though it works on aircraft perfectly fine as well. Just like in the previous technique, you need a clean brush to apply dots of colour onto areas where you want the effect. Let's start with the highlights. You'll need to mix a colour that is roughly the same as the model's base coat, but a lot lighter and saturated. Apply dots of this colour onto the areas where you want the highlights to be. This will generally be on open, flat surfaces. Again, try not to do too much at once, though if you do make a mistake, it is really easy to clean up with white spirit. Now, with your blending brush, use circular motions to blend the colour into the surface until it features a smooth transition. You may want to repeat it a couple of times until you achieve the effect that you desire. As for shadows and dark areas, it's essentially the same, though instead of being on open areas, they will generally be focused around areas where overlapping takes place, or where two elements meet, such as panel lines, bolts, hatches, and things like that. Apply dots of colour with a brush, and then blend again with a soft blending brush, this time sort of streaking away from the starting point of the shadow. This will create an effect where the oil paint starts out quite opaque, but gradually lightens up, imitating a shadow very closely. It's pretty similar to the streaks and stains effect, though this time it's vital that the blending has a smooth transition to look authentic. After applying a bunch of light and shadowed areas to your model, it will appear far more dynamic and realistic. Now on to the last technique, spot modulation. It's probably not the official name of this technique, though it's what I like to call it. It's very similar to the previous forced highlights technique in that you are blending dots of oil paint onto flat surfaces. However, this time it's not to add highlights, it's to add colour variation. For this, I recommend choosing between 3 and 4 colours that would look nice when blended into your model's surface. For example, a Russian 4BO surface would look great with specks of off-white, yellow, lighter green or brown, though you could make any other colours work too. Anything that ends up looking nasty can again be easily removed with white spirit. Once you have chosen your colours, apply them in fairly random specks on the surface, making sure to have an even amount of each colour applied. Once again, take your soft blending brush and blend them all in. It doesn't matter if they mix together a bit, this is fine. Just be aware that because they are different colours to the base layer, it's very easy to overdo this effect. Apply very small amounts at once, making sure to take a step back every once in a while to see how the model looks. What you may find to be happening is that there are very distinguished circles of colour blended in the spots where you applied your oil paint. This can be fixed with continuous blending until it looks good, or you can remove the paint with white spirit, then apply a coat of spirit to the surface and wet blend the paint with a sort of stippling motion. Wet blending requires a lot more experience though, so you may want to do some practice with this technique before moving on to a proper model. Again, this technique is more suited to AFV modelers, though it will also work on some damaged aircraft. Well, that's all I have for you today, guys. I know it's only 4 techniques, and there's a lot more you can do with oil paints, though I feel that they can provide some very nice effects for someone just starting out with oils. As always, if you need any further explanations with certain effects, simply leave a comment down below. I try to respond within the same day that comments are posted, so ask away. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to drop a like. This will help us reach more aspiring modelers. And if you didn't find it helpful, leave a dislike and explain why in the comments. That's it for now, and I hope to see you all next week. Bye!